Hi guys, welcome to the first of my new jump rope tutorials. In this video I want to talk about jump ropes themselves. So since I started my jump rope channel, the most common question I've got from viewers is what jump rope do you use or where do you get your jump ropes? And I want to use this video as an opportunity to answer some of those questions and also give you guys a bit of a broader overview of what kind of options are available and help you make some more informed choices when it comes to purchasing jump ropes. Now this video is going to primarily focus on jump ropes for freestyle, but before I get onto it I want to talk a little bit about a couple of other types of jump rope that exist just so that you're aware of them, and if you're interested these are things that you can look more into. So first up, there are speed ropes. So what makes this a speed rope? Two things. Firstly, the cord. So the cord here is a metal wire. In this case, it's covered in a thin layer of plastic. In the case of other speed ropes, there isn't necessarily a plastic coating, but the idea behind the wire is that it's very thin. It's supposed to essentially just cut through the air with very little air resistance so that you can spin the rope as fast as possible. Now the other aspect that makes a speed rope is the handle design. So what you'll notice with a speed rope is there's an independent turning mechanism for the rope compared to the rest of the handle. And this reduces the friction of turning the rope and allows you to spin the rope at much higher speeds than you can with a conventional jump rope. Now, this is all great if you want to practice your speed and do as many jumps as you possibly can. Personally, I've never been very interested in speed jump rope, so I don't tend to use these much at all. They tend to be quite bad for doing tricks because this independent turning mechanism makes these quite unpleasant to do crosses. In addition, the cable is quite rigid and not necessarily very flexible, and that means that you can't really do things very easily like wraps or releases. So it's just not a very suitable jump rope for freestyle. And I think that's true regardless of whether you're a beginner or a more experienced person. These are just not fun to use for that. So these are very specialized jump ropes that can be very useful if you want to do one thing, but otherwise we're going to put them aside for now. The other kind of rope I want to briefly discuss is the weighted jump rope. So these come in all sorts of different flavors. This is a very cheap example. Again, actually, this is a metal cord coated in some plastic, but the cord is much thicker, so the rope is quite a bit heavier. What makes these usually quite distinctive is that the handles tend to be quite a bit heavier than your conventional handle, so it requires more energy to turn the rope. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with using weighted jump ropes. I think it's obvious that you will probably burn more calories an hour, especially if you're starting out using them, than other kinds of ropes, which means that they could potentially be very useful for fitness. I also think that if you are just starting out and a weighted jump rope is what you have lying around, usually they're absolutely fine for learning your basic tricks like your crosses, your double unders, etc. So no real issues with them, but as you get a bit more advanced, you're going to tend to find that these are quite limited in some of the things that you can do. So if you've tried jump rope for a month or so and you're interested in learning some more advanced skills and you want to push on beyond what you can do with a weighted jump rope, it's probably time to put it away and think about getting yourself a dedicated freestyle rope. So what are your options when it comes to freestyle jump ropes? Let's start with the cord material. So first we have plastic cords. In these cases, these are 4mm PVC plastic cords with a string core, although sometimes they're just plastic all the way through. You can see they come in different colors. Option number 2 is to use a beaded rope, which consists of a piece of string, usually a thin layer of nylon, and a series of 1 or 2 inch beads of varying colors throughout the rest of the rope. Let's talk advantages and disadvantages. First up, PVC plastic ropes. So these are cheap, which is pretty great. They're also one of the lightest jump rope materials, except for the wire, which as we've discussed is not very suitable for jump rope because it's not very flexible. Plastic ropes are much more flexible. Their lightness means that you can use them without getting tired as quickly. It also means that they're quite good for doing multiples because they're quite easy to spin faster. And it also means that when you make mistakes with plastic ropes, the damage tends to be a bit more limited because you can only hit yourself so hard with a piece of plastic. I don't want to minimize that too much. It can still hurt a lot, but it won't hurt as much as if you hit yourself with a beaded rope. So a beaded rope tends to be heavier because although the string is very light, the beads themselves tend to add quite a bit of weight to the rope. Now that weight isn't entirely a disadvantage. One of the nice things about beaded ropes is that the weight of them allows the rope to carry its own momentum more easily, which can be quite useful when you're doing tricks in a restricted position, such as if both of your hands are behind your back or behind your knees or something like that. They're also much easier to see when you're actually jumping rope, which makes them often more suitable if you're trying to show off your skills. And in my experience, they tend to be a bit more durable than the plastic ropes, because although the beads do eventually get discolored or potentially shatter, that tends to take a long time, and it's also quite easy to replace beads. Whereas PVC ropes, no matter what surface you use them on, will eventually snap in the middle, and you will just need to completely replace the cord. Small note that the individual pros and cons of beads and PVC ropes depends on which ones you buy, and they can vary considerably. So a beaded rope, it can vary in terms of the weight and the thickness of the string and the weight and the thickness of the beads. Likewise with the PVC rope, sometimes these can be thick, they can be heavy, they can be unpleasant to use. So I'm kind of talking in the best case scenario. I'll talk a bit later about where you can get good quality versions of these jump ropes. In terms of what material I prefer, I generally prefer PVC ropes because I find that the benefits in terms of speed and lightness kind of outweigh some of the benefits of the beaded ropes for me personally. But I do acknowledge that the beaded ropes are often a bit prettier, and I do try and jump rope with them as well. But in any case, I know a lot of people who jump rope very seriously who use beaded ropes, so this is very much a personal preference, and it's definitely worth trying them out, both of them out, if you are keen on practicing a little more. Let's talk about handles. Handles for freestyle jump ropes are almost always made of plastic, and they come in a variety of sizes. So this is kind of your typical small jump rope handle. I think it's about 5 inches in length. This is a longer one. I think it's about 8 inches. That's the comparison length. So maybe like 1.5 times longer. You also have handles that are in between in length as well. So this one's a bit longer than my short one, a bit shorter than my long one. Personally, I've always preferred longer handles because they make crosses a bit easier. But for me, more importantly, they've just been much easier to catch when I'm doing release type tricks where you're letting a handle go and then you're catching it again, compared to short handles where there's just much less margin for error. The downside of using long handles is that they are a bit slower than short handles, primarily because the short handles are lighter, just because they take less material to make. Some people might argue that learning with a short handle is better than learning with a long handle. And they might say that because when you're using a short handle, you're forced to do tricks very fully and with good technique in order to get the rope over you. Whereas with a long handle, you can kind of sometimes be a bit lazy and just rely on the extra length of the handle to do tricks. Now, I personally am not sure how true that argument is. I think you can learn very good form on a long-handled rope, but it is something that you can potentially consider if you're starting out and you want to make sure that you're learning all your tricks correctly, that you might prefer to start with a short handle and experiment with a long handle at a later point. But I'm not going to make that argument. So hopefully that gives you guys a bit of an overview of what kind of options are available. So the next natural question is, where do you buy these jump ropes from? As I said earlier, you can have plastic ropes that vary a lot in terms of their quality, so it's good to know places that you can buy good quality ropes and know that they're going to be good quality. Personally, for the last 10 years or so, the vast majority of jump ropes that I have bought have been from buyjumpropes.net. I think the overall quality of their ropes has generally been fantastic and the price is very good. I primarily use their PVC ropes, which have a string core inside them. This makes them a little bit lighter and a little bit more flexible, although in my experience possibly a bit less durable than the solid PVC cables. One of the things I have always liked about buyjumpropes PVC cords is that they come in 4mm lengths, whereas if you just go to a bog standard shop and you buy yourself a plastic jump rope, you'll tend to get a cord that is thicker than that, maybe 5 or 6mm. And that might not sound like a big difference, but that is the diameter of the cord, and it ends up making a substantial difference to the weight of the rope. So in general, like, thinner is better, even if it means a little bit less durability. So the main disadvantage of buyjumpropes.net is that they are based in the US, and if you're outside of the US, that means that there can be fairly large international shipping costs that can sometimes dwarf the costs of the ropes themselves if you're buying only a small amount. Now, I'm based in the UK, so I'm going to give you guys a couple of other options that you can look at if you're based there as well. One option is a friend of mine called Chris runs his own website where he sells really high quality jump ropes. I'll put a link to that as well. And there are also jump ropes sold by Jump Rope UK, which is the national rope skipping organization in the UK. Just to be clear, the recommendations I'm giving you now are my personal recommendations, and I have absolutely no financial interest whatsoever in any of the places that I've mentioned so far. One small note I want to add is that if you're buying a freestyle jump rope from somewhere that I haven't mentioned, a potential red flag is a jump rope that is surprisingly expensive. So the freestyle jump ropes, often they just consist of a plastic handle, a plastic cord, maybe some plastic beads on a string, and a stopper to stop the rope from coming out. Now, it doesn't take a genius to realize that all of those components are very cheap. There are some freestyle ropes potentially on the market with like slightly snazzier looking designs, but in my experience, there is really no reason to deviate from the kind of ropes that work here. And if you see a very expensive freestyle jump rope, it's probably not worth the money. That's not necessarily true of speed ropes because the design of the handle and its connection to the rope is relatively complex, and I think there are often patents related with these. These things can often be relatively expensive, but you should still be able to buy a cheap one if you're interested in purchasing one. Final thing I want to talk about briefly is rope length. So when you're buying a new jump rope, you often get an option to choose how many feet you want your cord to be, like 7, 8, 9, 10 feet. If I have the choice, I will tend to buy a rope cord that is 9 feet, and then I will cut it down to something that's closer to 8 feet. When I was starting out jump rope, I remember reading some size guides that suggested I should be using a 10-foot rope. I'm 6'4" tall, so that's kind of like the maximum length rope that they recommend for people that height. In my experience, you tend to find that the length of rope you need gets shorter as you get better at jump rope, and I'm going to demonstrate this a bit in the next video. But in general, I wouldn't worry about this too much. Buy a longer rope than you need and make sure that the rope you are buying is one that you can adjust the length of. It's always the case that it's much easier to shorten a excessively long rope than it is to lengthen a rope which isn't long enough at present. In terms of like how the length of the rope should look when it's going over your head, going to address that in the next video. Okay, that's everything for today. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon. If you've got any questions, please just put them in the comments and I will try to answer them when I have time.